Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but when I need foreign policy experience, I don't go to CNN and I don't go to Fox. I don't go to any of those stations. I go to this man right here, Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari, with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have you on the air with us, Lieutenant Colonel.
It's good to be here, Ken. We finally had an opportunity to connect.
Yeah, listen, we are so very, very glad that you're with us tonight. Foreign policy seems to be the mint de jewel right now. For those who are on the left, are you shocked that the left is becoming such a war hawk now that they want war?
Look, I've always said, it doesn't matter who makes the decision. And in this case, current POTUS, President Trump, previous POTUS, President Obama. Decisions are decisions. They're neither right or wrong, but there's consequences to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be able to take through those consequences. Um, so, in the case of the foreign policy, I think individuals who are currently saying that, look, we shouldn't be withdrawing out of Syria. Look, if you pull 50 American soldiers out of Syria, and that's going to collapse your foreign policy, you don't have a foreign policy to begin with. And I am very disappointed on both the Republican and the Democratic side that they just don't have a long-term vision on foreign policy. You have to have a long-term vision when it comes to what is happening with maturation within the region. And once you're able to look through a long viewpoint on these issues that matters, I think whether the decision of the POTUS to pull the soldiers out of Syria makes more sense.
Now you mentioned the number because for some odd reason this is a great magnitude for the Republicans and for the socialist, Marxist, communist Democrats. 50 soldiers being pulled out of Syria. We're not talking about the withdrawal from Iraq, where thousands of troops are moving out. That's not this. So why is it so important for the left and for Republicans to profane a removal of 50 individuals from virtually borders of Turkey and Syria?
Because again, long-term goal for them is the diminishing powers of the executive branch,
Ah,
and that's all it is. It was for the Republicans when Obama was in office. It was for the Democrats with President Trump in office, and unfortunately, it's doing long-term damage to the nation overall. Look, I'll give you an example, and I think that the best person that defined it as far as our foreign policy was you go back to 2017 where Defense Secretary Ash Carter actually talked about what the budget requirements were for the U.S. In the long term. On the Near East side, if your readers and listeners have an opportunity, they could take a look at the article we wrote, which we actually predicted was going to happen currently, that is happening within the region as far as withdrawal from Syria. And the article we wrote was about that the Kurds will take Department of Defense money but their support and the support that their hearts go on to their first love, which is the Russians. And one of the problems I think we're having is in 2017, Ash Carter, when he was briefing the forces in Washington, he spoke to the panel and said that as we're looking on a list of what we have to see what the projection of our future foreign policy issues are going to be, he looked at Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and terrorism as the top five evolving strategic challenges that are driving the Department of Defense planning and budget for the long term. When he conducted that briefing, it came out of that briefing shortly after Ash Carter had given that testimony.
mm-hmm.
At that time, Mr. Murad, who was the secretary of the Central Council of the Patriotic Kurdistan Union, PUK party, met with the Russian ambassador at the time, Morfanov, in the KRG, Kurdish Regional Government at that time, and told the Russians that representatives that the Kurds in Iraq, Syria, and Turkey are allies of the Russians.
Wow.
Here we are, where Ash Carter in 2017 is saying, look, here are the things we have to deal with from a long-term strategic perspective. And just because he says this is what our priorities are going to be going forward, in 2017, you got the Kurdish regional government representatives saying that we're going to work with the Russians. Look, the problem that people in Washington have is they don't understand anything about the region. I hate to tell you. We're the only ones at the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement who have really dissected the Kurdish issue. Today, there's bombing campaigns by the Turks in Iraq, northern Iraq, which is what we consider American-held territory. The Turks don't care that America actually is the owner of the battle space in Iraq. If they have to go after a target, they're going to go and kill that target. The Turks could care less if U.S. had troops on the ground in Syria or not. If Turkey decided to kill PKK members, which they did in Syria, the U.S. wasn't going to turn around and engage Turkish soldiers and kill them, which is a NATO allies, because they went after like PKKs operating Kurdish PKK in Syria. So the fact that you're complaining and saying that, well, if you pull the 50 soldiers out, that Turkey's going to attack, and Turkey's been attacking them for a couple of years now, both in Syria and Iraq. And by the way, when it's attacking them in Iraq, in the villages, you know who's providing the targeting support for the Turks? It's the Kurds in Iraq.
Oh my God!
Kurds who are giving the targeting support for the Kurdish Air Force to bomb the PKK Kurds in northern Iraq. When we set up the no-fly zone for the Sunni Muslim Kurds, going back to the 90s, the first thing that they did, the Barzani Kurds, who are operating out of Erbil today, and the Jalal Talabani Kurds, who are operating out of Nominee, which is a province in Iraq, they killed each other. They killed each other in the thousands. They had actual fights in major battles. They killed each other while we were their Air Force, protecting them from the Iraqis that were under Saddam Hussein's regime from attacking them. We have been with the Kurds, who are a tribal group, going back to 50 plus years now. Our relationship with the Kurds didn't happen suddenly because we started the first Gulf War, where we established a no-fly zone for them. We knew who they were. We were operating with them, supporting them, going back to the 60s, because we were fighting the Russians when in the region. Today, the Kurds of Iraq are enemies of the Kurds in Syria and the Kurds that are in southern Turkey. The Kurds in Iraq conduct operations against Iran and northern Iran. The Kurds in Iran conduct operations against Iraq and in northern Iraq. The Kurds that are Talabani and Barzani kill each other on the battlefield. They can't even agree on political requirements of what they want to do in the future. So for us to say that they're great allies for us, well, they have to be enduring partners, and they have to be individuals capable of running nation states. We supported them to a point where they had a Kurdish regional government. And the only places that ISIS ever operated that sprouted out were originally in northern Iraq and Kurdish administered areas, and in Syria, under Kurdish administered areas. And the major places where we had to fight the majority of these ISIS operators were in those areas. They didn't spring up in Baghdad. They didn't spring up in southern Iraq. They didn't spring up in other areas within Syria. That's where they sprouted out. When our Delta operators went in and took out Abu Sayyaf, who was a major financier in Syria in 2015 for ISIS oil, we found out that ISIS oil was being shipped on Lebanese plated trucks through Kurdish administered areas in Syria, through $20 a barrel to the Europeans. So in this process, our allies were actually selling ISIS oil. I don't understand why the people who come against the current POTUS from both the Democratic and Republican Party have a hard time understanding these things. A lot of these things that I'm talking about not only are now in open source, but these are the things that have been briefed in open sessions to Congress. And everyone has said, if you want to have a long, enduring focus as to where you want to be within the region, you have to understand that there's a time where you have to say, look, we've been here for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
We have helped you to a point where you're a regional government. It is not our fault that you cannot work within your neighbors, and it's not our fault that you cannot get along with each other. If I make a Kurd happy in Syria, the Kurd in Iraq is unhappy.
Yeah.
If I make a Kurd in Iraq happy, the Kurd in Syria and in Nominee is unhappy. If I make a Kurd in Iran happy, the Kurd in Iraq and Turkey and Syria is unhappy. And we cannot continue down this path and continuously give our young men and women to go to battle and die on the battlefields in those areas to make people happy. That's not what
that's not a clear, good foreign policy. President of the United Assyrian Appeal, you can find him on Twitter at NEC_SE, Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari, with us tonight. You heard Lindsey Graham and others say pulling out the 50. We're not talking 500. We're not talking 5,000. We're not even talking 50,000. If you pulled out the 50 soldiers that hold that border, two things are going to happen. Christians are going to be wiped out of those particular areas. And number two, Turkey will invade Syria. Is Lindsey Graham correct, or is that hyperbole?
Well, Christians isn't being wiped out in Iraq since 2003. I mean, okay, Lindsey Graham, you could have dedicated one brigade of equipment directly to support them, especially in the historical areas, to include the what we call the Assyrian plane for them in northern Iraq or the Harbor River Valley when they were getting wiped out. Why don't you commit that type of a force structure? Look, Christians in Iraq, under U.S. supervision, with NATO being on the ground, European Union operating there, with every major force structure to include the Koreans who provided support in the region, went from 1.3 to 1.5 million to 150,000 left. That's just in Iraq. When you have your entire force structure on the ground, they're getting butchered, massacred. Mm-hmm. And in 2014, they went through a genocide. Christians in Iraq will still go through a genocide. Christians in Syria will still go through a genocide until the Western nations that supported the establishment of regional government for others establish a regional government for these individuals in accordance in Iraq to what the Iraqi constitution is. The majority of the minorities in the Islamic nations throughout the Middle East have always suffered. They have suffered for centuries, if not millennia. And this is just a historical fact. It's not something that Colonel Sangari made up. For the U.S. foreign policy to try to unravel that with 50 people is ridiculous. And I hope that our leadership from the Senate and from the House, both Democrat and Republican, who are making these decisions, understand that they need to look at it from a long-term perspective. The United States cannot be committed to these local fights. These local fights will take place all the time. As I told you, Turkey was already operating in Syria. The only thing Turkey wanted to do was to make sure that they had a buffer zone for 30 kilometers or 40 kilometers. U.S. was negotiating with them to have a 30 kilometers because the majority of that is desert area. Mm-hmm. The rest of the 10 kilometers will put it in the mountainous urban areas. If Turkey wants to go into those areas for its border security, that's up to them. Mm-hmm. You could, as a NATO ally, give them that opportunity. Guess what? They can have to pick up the consequences of those operations that they conduct. The reason the Christians in Syria were being butchered, the reason why the Yazidis and Christians in Iraq were being butchered, was because ISIS was landing in Turkey and was crossing the border and conducting operations. The same ISIS that was taking oil, sending it through the Kurds that were tied to Turkey within the regional government structures and selling that oil to Turkey. And Turkey was, of course, turning around and converting some of that into weapon systems that they were giving to the ISIS guys that were crossing the border, to include providing them with food. This is not a top secret thing. These are open source discussions. These are briefings that have taken place in Congress, at the State Department. So I'm not sure why our senators and congressmen do not point these issues out, these facts out. The president is making the call for the future longevity of U.S. foreign policy within the region. And as far as those prisoners that are ISIS prisoners that are sitting in these so-called holding facilities that are in the Syria itself, which the Sunni Muslim Kurds are supposed to be securing, if the issue is that as soon as American pulls out his 50 soldiers, then the Kurds are going to open those jails because they're not going to secure them, allow ISIS to get on the ground and operate. Well, guess what? Turkey knows exactly who all those ISIS operators are. They cross through their border to go conduct operations in Syria. It is the responsibility of Turkey to ensure that they either hunt down those ISIS operators, kill them, or address them by putting them in prison where they need to be held within Turkish borders or in Syria under their supervision, not under U.S. taxpayer dollars for the next 20, 30 years.
You make all the sense of the world. That's why I love you coming on my network and on my program to talk about these particular foreign policy issues. Got one quick question for you. We only got 2 minutes, and I got to have you come back to talk about this. It is reported tonight that President Donald Trump is flirting with giving Iran $15 billion to bail it out as part of an agreement going forward regarding its nuclear functions. Your thoughts, your ideas, your candor regarding the flirtation.
Look, we put sanctions against Iran, but we kept the port of Charbat open. And I've had this discussion with you before. India is currently developing that port for Iran and running a railhead all the way through into Afghanistan to put pressure on Pakistan in order to put pressure on China. And these are global issues. And I think what happens is we get sucked into these little pieces, which are small fires. Even the Kurdish issue is a small fire. Let's see what the final outcome is going to be. And I think we are getting close to an agreement with Iran, regardless. And in the long run, Iran has struck an agreement with us. We'll probably strike another agreement with them. And when they came here during the UN General Assembly discussions, I think we made progress with trying to get to a new agreement for the betterment of the region and for security of Israel in the long run as our only strategic partner within the region. And hopefully all these migrations will develop into a better foreign policy for us.
The Near East Center for Strategic Engagement. Tell everybody what that is and why they should be going to your website right now to get information on foreign policy.
We are a think tank. We are a operational and strategic think tank, and we provide political multi-analysis and assessment of Middle East affairs for a diverse clientele. And I would recommend, if people want to know what's happening today, go read what we wrote 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We knew that this was going to happen. So we predicted what people are talking about today 4 or 5 years ago.
Why not just be 5 years ahead of the mainstream media people? Why not just go directly to the Near East Center for your information? I thank you so much for coming on our program and making it understandable what's really going on with the musical chairs in Washington, D.C. and foreign policy in the Middle East. We'll have you back in a couple of weeks, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. I hope it helps, and God bless.
God bless you as well. I am telling you, it is always a great honor to have the Lieutenant Colonel on our program. And I'm going to tell you right now, you need to go to, he's president of the United Assyrian Appeal, but you also need to go to Twitter and follow him at NEC_SE and go to the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement to get your news and information. Stop waiting for Fox to tell you what the establishment Republicans and the leftists want you to hear. Get the news right here at TECN TV. We will be back with more of the best in urban conservative talk right after these messages.